Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on European Confessions. The following story that you're going to be listening to, it comes from a translation of a message that I received. The message, it's like this. Hello, how are you? Can you please post my own story? Is anonymous. It was in the year 2010. I was living in East London, a vibrant city here in our country, on the southern eastern coast of South Africa. Life was neither too hard nor too easy for me, just the right amount of challenge to keep me on my toes. So I was in my late 20s. I was working as a receptionist at a law firm, and I was okay with my job. I would go to work, like life was just one revolving door for me. Go to work, come back home, sleep, feel lonely, go to church, pray, and then go back to work again. I kept on dreaming of something more. Perhaps a life that will be filled with love, adventure, and a partner would sweep me off from my feet. I never even thought that I'll end up dating a foreign guy, but after being hurt several times by our South African boys, I thought that it was far much better for me to try something out. I wanted to date a Nigerian guy, but then one of my friends scared me. She was like, they are going to rip open your cookie. So then I thought that it was far much better for me to date at least a guy who was from Zim. So it was on a seemingly ordinary afternoon. That was when I first met him. The day had been long, the kind that drags on with little excitement. I had just finished my shift and decided to stop by a nearby cafe for a cup of coffee. It was one of those quaint little places where regulars gathered, the kind of spot where everyone knew each other's name. But on this day, as I entered, I noticed a man who stood out from the usual crowd. He was tall, with a commanding presence, and seemed to draw attention effortlessly. His skin, it was dark, a deep, rich brown, and he wore a very beautiful suit, one of those tailored suits that screamed wealth and power. You could tell that this man, he had already made it in life. From his accent and from his skin tone, I could tell that this man, he was not South African, and I felt my heart beating hard against my chest because I had been fantasizing about dating a guy who was not from my own country. Despite his imposing appearance, there was something else about his eyes, sharp yet soft, that caught my attention. He was sitting alone, engrossed in a newspaper. A cup of coffee was just beside him, and he seemed to be enjoying himself. So I wanted to grab his attention. That was when I ordered coffee, even though I still had coffee on my table. That was when our eyes met briefly. He smiled at me, and it was almost like a gesture that felt both inviting but mysterious at the same time. I was intrigued by his smile, but I was hesitant. I had heard stories of wealthy men who always prey on young, naive women, and I had always been careful not to fall into such traps. But something about this man was totally different. As fate would have it, the cafe was unusually crowded that day, and the only available seat was at his table if I wanted to go and sit somewhere else. So, with a mixture of reluctance and curiosity, that was when I gathered the nerves and I approached him. I don't want to lie. The moment that I got up from the place where I was seated, there was one woman who came and just sat. So I knew that there was no way that I was going to be able to return back to the table where I was seated before. I approached him and I asked him if I could join. I was feeling really ashamed of myself. He looked up and he smiled warmly and he said, "Okay, it's fine, you can sit." He said, "Please have a seat." He said in a deep, smooth voice that sent shivers down my spine. As for his English, immediately I knew that he was from Zim. He spoke that Harvard English with capital letters, like most of the people from Zim. I was beginning to think that I'll spend the afternoon alone. So he said. I smiled back, slightly embarrassed by my own nervousness. We introduced ourselves, and he told me his name was Tendai, not his real name. Originally, he was from Zim. I had already deducted that he was from Zim but he had been living in South Africa for over a decade. He owned a construction company, one that was doing quite well. As we talked, I found myself captivated by his stories. He spoke of his work with such passion, describing the challenges of running a business in a foreign country and the setbacks and the dreams that he still hoped to achieve. He was well spoken, intelligent, and surprisingly humble to someone who had achieved so much. So one could tell that there was too much chemistry that was going on between me and him. It was as if this was not the first time that we were speaking with each other. The chemistry, it was too much, something that I had never felt in a long time. He asked about my life, my dreams, and listened intently as I spoke. I found myself opening up to him in a way that I had never opened up with anyone before. Hours passed, but without either of us noticing. And by the end of the day, we realized that the cafe, it was nearly closing. I have enjoyed this, he said as we stood to leave. I would love to see you again. So I hesitated for a moment, but there was something about him that made me want to take the chance. I agreed and we exchanged numbers. As I walked home that evening, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I had always been cautious, never one to jump into something new without careful thought. But with this man and I, it felt different. It felt really right. Over the next few weeks, we began to see each other all the times. He would take me to the finest restaurants. He would buy me gifts and treat me like a queen. He was the perfect gentleman. He was kind, always kind and considerate and attentive. And it was as if he could read my mind, always knowing exactly what I needed, even before I did. As for my friends, they were envious, but they were also cautious. They warned me about getting too involved too quickly because I was already talking about having a baby by him, but I brushed off their concerns. Tendai was different, and I told myself that he was the man that I had been waiting for, the one who could make all of my dreams come true. Yes, as much as I was falling for him, there were things about him that did not quite add up. He was often away on business trips, sometimes for weeks at a time, and whilst he was always there for me whenever we were together, there was a part of his life that he kept hidden from me. He never talked about his past. He was always involved in this traditional stuff, some of the things that I could not understand. Yet when we first met, I asked him if he believed in traditional stuff, and he said, "Oh no, I am a Christian, a Pentecostal Christian." But after I had fallen in love with him, that was when he started introducing me to a lot of traditional stuff. Even though I knew he had a family back in Zim, he never wanted to speak about them, so I did not push. After all, we were still getting to know each other, and I know that everyone had secrets, but there was something about his silence on certain topics that left me uneasy. I once asked him what he thinks about the Holy Spirit, Jesus Christ, and after you would have died, do you go to hell or to heaven? He always had these funny answers. He will never respond to you. He will always brush you off, and I told myself that I was overthinking things, but deep down a part of me knew that there was something about this guy. The months passed and our relationships grew stronger, and he continued to treat me really great, showering me with love and affection, and I found myself falling deeper and deeper in love with him. We talked about our future, about the possibility of starting a baby. It was I want to confess that it was I who asked him to remove a condom. And at that time, when we started talking about our future, I felt like I had found someone who truly understood me.